Welcome back to Cards and Comics. Today I have an SGC order or grading order reveal. And it's pretty special because for the first time in my collecting career, I have actually crossed over PSA graded cards to SGC. In some cases, it's a double crossover, meaning they were in SGC holders before. I sent them to PSA and now I'm sending them back to SGC, and we'll talk about that. And on my channel, two of my most popular videos are my PSA to SGC SGC to PSA crossover videos, where I was talking about flipping cards by basically using the arbitrage and value between SGC and PSA prices, mostly for vintage, and showing what kind of grades I was getting, taking SGC cards and then regrading them with PSA. And I had a lot of success early on, but then it got worse and worse in terms of, the grading basically was getting to where I was losing money by doing it, so I quit doing it. So this is kind of a reverse video, my reverse Uno version of crossing over. But we're going to start here today, and before I get into the video, and the cards I submitted, the one thing I will say is, I'm not a fanboy of PSA or SGC. I use them both. I have tons of cards in both holders, and so today's video is probably going to piss off both PSA and SGC fanboys because there's room for improvement or consistency in both camps. So we're going to start off with cards I just graded. For the first time, they weren't crossovers. They were just cards I submitted, and they came from multiple sources. I'll talk about it. First up here is this really cool 97 Pinnacle certified gold team Ken Griffey Jr. It came back in 8. These are really hard to get without surface scratches, and they have the little bit of defects technology. They are also numbered on the back. I believe they're either numbered out of 3 or 500. I forget. But it's a really cool card, and I really love this set. It's a set that I really think is, I don't say undervalued, because there's another version of this set that's a refractor version that's, I think, numbered like 30 or something, so even rarer. So maybe it gets more of the love, but this card set is really nice, and I just love having the Griffey, because as a Griffey collector. So anyway, so fun first card. Next up is a card that actually surprised me because I've had this card raw for a lot of years, and it is the 95 Pinnacle Museum Collection bubble blowing card. Basically, a really cool just base card of Griffey, and it came back at 9.5. So this card was just floating around in my collection for a lot of years, raw, and I just said, hey, why don't I just send this in? It's popular card. It always sells well, even raw. You don't have a it's like a $5 or $10, maybe a $20 card at a show, and a 9.5 holder, it's going to be worth, I think, maybe a couple $100. Very cool card. So glad to get that museum, and I'd love to get the artist proof version as well. So there you go, 95 museum collection Ken Griffey Jr. Pinnacle, really cool card. And again, the museum collection cards are amazing. All right, next up is a card that I graded. It's part of my Frank Thomas set. This is the No Protector Refractor. Came back in 8. I felt like this was the one I was a little disappointed in. There wasn't that many cards I was disappointed in, but this one I felt like I was hoping for a 9. This card, it's not really, I don't really see maybe a little bit of corner touch, but it's got the double refractor, double-sided refractor. So it looks like a pretty clean card. I don't have them in sleeves yet, so there's a little fuzz on the card, but I don't know. I'm pretty excited about this card, so I don't know. I think it's a really nice card. We'll see. I mean, it's hard to really, without getting into maybe some looping, and to see maybe there's some scratches or some other defects. But I thought this card had a shot at a 9 and came back in 8, so it is what it is. I'm not going to sit here and be like, well, it should have been a 10 or a 9, whatever. It is what it is. Came back in 8. So a little disappointed in this card, but it's a beautiful card. It's a really cool. Those No Protector refractors are really nice. All right, next up, for those who remember, I opened up a 83 Topps reprint set of the 1952 Topps set. So it's the first reprint ever of that set, licensed by Topps. And so I graded the best 3 cards in that set, which would be the Mays, Mantle, and Jackie Robinson. So the Mays came back at 8, and it's a little off center, left to right. And you can see there's the back. So again, not, a terrible grade, but again, a little off. The Jackie came back at 9, which is actually a pretty tough grade. Again, this came back, these are from 1983, so they're not like brand new reprints. These are the original OG reprints from Topps, and this thing has great centering. Really love this card. And just because, I can't afford a card in this condition, the real card, so it's cool to see this card again. Cool red back. So, and there is the 9. And the only card that SGC sleeved in the whole order was this card, which would be the Mantle, and it came back an 8. So I'm really happy they all came back 8 or above, just because I think it makes just me, if I want to resell these cards or trade these cards, that a lot easier. So again, from that box set. Next up are some football cards. So I did a video where I talked about buying a collection, 70s collection of football cards. And these are some cards I picked out of there to see how they would grade. First up is a Mike Webster rookie card from 77. I am a Mike Webster collector. This is probably the 4th rookie card I own of Mike Webster, but I graded this one myself, and it's an 8. It's a little off left to right, but it's very sharp, and I'll show you sort of the corners here and the edges. It's a really sharp card. Maybe a little tick there. But again, you got to remember, this card came from basically a collection of cards that was just laying around in my boxes for years. And I finally went through them and picked a few cards that get graded. So it means that there's probably more 8s in those boxes that I put together. I put them all in sleeves now. So they're on sleeves and soft holders, or soft sleeves. So they're easy to grade because they're already in the holder you need to grade them in. So I'm going to go through and maybe pick another 3 or 4 to send into SGC for next month. Because again, my first grading order went real well, because the second card I sent in was this card right here. 76 Franco Harris, and it came back an 8. So again, pretty good success. These aren't high dollar cards, but still 8s are desirable. And very happy with getting a 76 Franco Harris 8. And this is a card from a pack I opened way back in the day of 75 Topps Mini. I pulled the Willie Stargell, and I got an 8 on it. So again, really nice. There's a little white chip here. There's the back. So really happy with that card. Cool card, and it's a Pirate, and it's a 75 Mini. Next up are 274 O-Pee-Chees I just graded because I love the set, and I bought some cards in a lot, and I got this Billy Williams, and it came back a 5. I'm a little disappointed, but it's way off center. You can see the 74 back. So yeah, I thought maybe it was 6, Came back a 5. And the next card is a 6. It's a Manny Sanguian. And again, the centering on this card is terrible. Honestly, it's like 95-5 or 90-10. But it's a cool card anyway. I mean, this card is super hard to get. So I got a pile of 74 O-Pee-Chees I thought about getting graded. Now I know kind of like what they'll come back graded wise. Like these two I thought had chances at 6s and 7s. So I got 1 6 and a 5. So maybe I need to realize that they're probably more close to 5 and 6s than they are 6 and 7. So it's a cool card. And that's a great photo of Manny Sanguian. He was a great catcher for a lot of years for the Pirates. And my best card, probably, in terms of just rarity, this card is a pretty tough high number in 67 Topps. Again, I got this card at a card show from a collector that traded me a big stack of raw basketball cards, which I need to send in. So that might be my next order. A bunch of raw basketball, like 70, 71 Topps. And this card was in that order too. Now, the same guy traded me a Heritage All-Star 90, I think it was a 90, or maybe it was an 89 Topps All-Star style from Archives of Bryce Harper. That was basically a 1 in like 1,200 pack, short print that I got graded. And it came back okay. I think an 8 or 9. And that's a really tough card. So from the same guy. So, You know, he traded me a few cards, and this came back a 7. And honestly, you know, for a card just sitting around in my collection for years, finally coming back. And again, it's off center a little bit left to right on the back, but the you know, the front's pretty good. It's a little angle cut. You know, you can see it's a little thinner here than it is up here, but it's still a really nice presentable card. I think 7's pretty desirable. Tons of people need the high numbers in this set, and Mike Shannon's one of the hardest ones to get. So this card's worth a little bit of money. And so there you go. That's the non-crossover card. So for people who are ready to get angry or just, you know, get the pitchforks ready, here we go. First up, 1953 Bowman Ralph Kiner PSA 5. Okay. What was this card originally as a PSA? It was altered. And this is a weird altered because it doesn't say what it was. It doesn't say evidence of trimming. It doesn't say recolored. It doesn't say anything. It just says altered. In my original video, I thought maybe there was something going on with this top edge, where I thought it was kind of going down a little bit. Even in the holder, you can see there's space there. You know, and you can kind of see on the back where it looks like, you know, there's less space here than there is here, you know. So I thought maybe that's what it was, but they graded it 5. They didn't grade it trimmed. Now, this was originally in a SGC holder, and it was in a 7 or 7.5 holder. I can't remember which, but it was like a 7 or 7.5 because that's all I would buy back in the day. And so we go from, let's say, a 7 to altered to a 5. So SGC gave it at least two grades lower than the first time they graded it, and PSA said it was altered. So what does this make this card? I mean, it went from 7 to altered to 5, so not a lot of consistency here. So I don't know. Kiner is a guy I collect, you know, because he's a pirate. So maybe I'll just throw out my collection and say it's a questionable to low grade Kiner, because a 5 is, you know, let's say mid-grade Kiner. So there you go. First card. And we're seeing a lot of inconsistencies, not only with SGC, but with, you know, PSA said it's altered. They're saying it's a card that should be graded, but it's between a 5 and a 7. So a little odd. I'm not happy with that one. I thought, you know, I was hoping it would come back the same grade it was before. SGC graded it, and it did not. Next up is a pretty easy one. And I may even have the flip on this one. This one, it doesn't have the shenanigans associated as some other cards that I got graded. This card basically, was originally a 6. So it's a 9.5 now. So you're saying to yourself, probably like, well, it was a 6, now it's a 9.5. What's going on? This was the card I had graded through ComC. And what ComC did was, you know, they graded the card, you know, and it's hard to see cards on ComC. So what I missed when this was originally graded was it had the protector on it, and it was starting to peel up. And so PSA gave it a 6 for that little bit of peel coming up on this corner. Now, so I went in and got it. I popped it and peeled the card. So I grabbed the peel and I peeled it, put in the sleeve, sent to SGC, came back at 9.5. But my question here, or my thought here is, on cards like this, honestly is, should it have been a 6 to begin with from PSA? Meaning that, you know, even though there was a little bit of peel, you know, like, you know, flipped over, does that mean the card's a 6? When they know underneath it the card's not damaged, should they have given it maybe a 7 or an 8 instead of a 6? That's sort of what I'm wondering, because I just don't think it should have ever got a 6, no matter, even with that defect on it. Again, you see this card is numbered on the back, 439 out of 500. So it's a really cool card. The Griffey is sold pretty recently. This card, you know, just the regular card, not the refractor. The refractor is number out of 75. This card, and I do have the refractor version of this card, of the actual Frank Thomas. So there it is. That's the two cards next to each other. So got a 9.5 and a 9, which looks much better. it was just weird for me to have the refractor in a much higher grade than the base card. Now it's inverted, but that's the two cards side by side, which are really cool to see the base and the refractor next to each other. So there you go. That was a win. You know, I don't know if PSA would attend it. You know, I don't know. I mean, obviously, but it definitely was a card that I was satisfied with that regrade, because that's the true grade of the card. It was never a 6. It was always a 9 or a 10 with just that little bit of peel. Next up is a card I was super bitter about when it was graded originally, because I disagreed probably the second most of any card that was in this order with the grade. I was very disappointed with this grade. So originally this card, it's a 98 Donna's Crusade green, came back a 7. And man, I had looked at this card over and over and over. I have a 9, and not 9. I have a purple Crusade out of 100 that has a defect on it that made it grade a 6, and I was okay with that grade because I knew what the defect was. And again, you know, going into it, and it was a printing error. It wasn't like damage or anything. It was printed weird. It had a spot on it that was just a printing mistake. So they graded pretty harsh, but hey, you know, at least I can see the defect. Here, I never saw a defect on the card. I popped it, wiped it down. There's, you know, no Kurtz juice was used in any of these cards. I'm going to tell you that. Just, they weren't. I used a cloth and wiped them down. Nothing was soaked. Nothing, you know, was juiced. And this card came back a 9. And again, I think this card was always an 8 or a 9. I think it, in my opinion, you know, when I looked at it the first time, I thought it was a slam dunk 9, maybe a 10. So I came back from SGC at 9. To me, it's the right holder. I again vehemently disagreed with that 7 grade. Again, for those who don't know, these are numbered out 250. One of my favorite insert sets of the 90s. So finally have this card in the right holder. I'm not going to send it to PSA. I just feel like this is the right grade. Happy it's finally there. And again, very disappointed that originally graded a 7. So there you go. PSA 7 to SGC 9. And then at the end of the video, I'll give my overall thoughts and just kind of like, you know, what it kind of means for grading for when we do these kind of, I won't say exercises, but, you know, when we see these results, it's like everyone's always either, you know, shocked, or they're just like, oh, told you grading's a scam. I want to just address that at the end of this video. I got some more cards here. Next up is a Griffey card. Let's see if I can find it. Here you go. No Protector Griffey. 98 finest, just like the Thomas I had. And this came back a 7. There's the holder I cracked it from. And so it was a 7. Now it's a 8.5. Again, a very beautiful card. The double-sided. And again, I don't really see much on it other than a few scratches on the surface. So that's probably why I got the 8.5. I never thought this card was a 7. I thought it was an 8 or a 9. So the 8.5 grade was warranted and probably the grade it probably should have got. So to me, I was like, yeah, that's the grade. You know, I thought it was an 8 or a 9. So it came back an 8.5. So, you know, 1.5 point bump there. So we've seen 2 point bumps, 3.5 point bumps, 1.5 bump. So again, you know, PSA is grading cards harsher than SGC for sure. But again, from what, and again, I say again on, I know they're my cards and I'm biased, but still, you know, to me, I think there is the right grade for some of these cards, or cards, you know, or how I view the grading scale to be based on my experience. And this card should never have been a 7 holder. It had no real damage to the card that would make it grade a 7. So I felt like they were just very tough on the surface. You know, one scratch made it go from a possible 9 down to a 7. I just feel like that's just too harsh for these kind of cards. The way they were made, how they were. That is a no protector. Didn't have a protector on it to keep it from scratching. So I feel like it was definitely harshly graded. All right, next up is the number 1 card I was super mad about the first time around. And, you know, in this card, I pulled from a pack. And it's probably the only modern card that's in this order. But the original grade was a 6. And it's the 2022 Cosmic Chrome Julio Rodriguez Blue Moon Refractor. My favorite outside of the red refractor in the whole set. I was super happy to get the rookie card out of a box. It's still one of my favorite cards of Julio Rodriguez, and it got regraded and it came back an 8. So there you go. So it came, originally it was graded a PSA 9 or 7. Gosh, I can't talk. It was originally graded a 6. Now it is, again, old grade, new grade, 6 to an 8. So again, another 2-point bump. And again, this is the one I was super mad about because I don't see a defect that would make this card go from a 7 or an 8 to a 6. So I don't know. And again, you could say, well, I had someone say, well, look at that edge, it's curled, but when that's how the cards are cut. That isn't anything to do with a defect or the card damage afterwards. When you cut cards or you emboss cards, you're going to make an indent in the cardboard. Part of that process. It's just how the card is made. And there's another card that I'm going to show that same issue where I think PSA really got it wrong, is how they're looking at how these cards are versus, the technology used to make the card. They don't discount or don't take that into account. But anyway, this card came back from a 6 to an 8. I was hoping for a 9, but hey, look, it's much better than a 6. So I'll take it. And finally got this card in a holder that's at least somewhat respectable in terms of what I think the card really is. I think it's an 8 or a 9. I was hoping a 9 or 10 actually the first time. So we're a lot closer now than we were with PSA. So again, these are numbered out of 99. And again, it's one of my favorite parallels from that whole set. Just love it. It looks really cool. And it's a cool color match. All right, next up is the last real crossover I have. The last couple cards are a little bit of a different breed. So this card, I didn't actually grade myself. I purchased it, but when I got it home I bought it at the National. So if you look at my day 2 National pickup videos, you'll see this card in there. And originally it was a PSA 7. There you go. You hard to see that it says near mint 7. It's a mother load from 97 Metal Universe. Really tough card to grade because of all the cool die cuts and how intricate it is. And SGC gave it a 9. So we go from 7 to a 9. So again, the front of this card is super clean. It is super clean. Usually you see chipping or issues on this card because of just how it's made. That was the first thing I was like, well, this card has no real chipping on the front where you see all this foil and die cutting. So that's really unusual. So the back is usually where you can see some chipping. But again, the back is very clean. You can say, well, you got these tips here. But again, when they made these cards, those tips, that was part of that cutting process. And I think this is where they caught it. See down here, right here, you'll see, right there. If I put it in the light, see how that card kind of looks like it's indented or whatever, or how it kind of curls over. That's how the card's cut. That's the die cut process. So you're going to get a little bit of this, mixed in. And I feel like that's what they really saw. And again, someone's like, oh, that's a crease. No, that's just part of the card design. It's not a crease. So I think they just saw some of that and went, oh, the card's got some damage. And it's just how the card was cut and die cut. It's not secondary damage. And I feel like they just don't understand the cards enough to really know how the cards are made and how they should look. So I think SGC did a great job in getting this card back into the proper holder. Again, 7 to 9, so another 2-point grade bump going from PSA to SGC. Before I get to the last 2 cards, I talk about these grade bumps and sort of like grading itself. The consistency is really not there. Even with an SGC, you saw a card that was a 5 come back a 7. And there's another card I'm going to show you here in a minute that's the same thing. Or it was a 7, came back a 5. And then PSA says it's altered. So just lack of consistency between the 2 graders is really disappointing at this stage grading maturity, honestly. But in general, I think it's also just showcases, you know, how grading is a human endeavor. And people are different. People have opinions, and sometimes they don't agree. Decade after decade, how the grade should look. So have the standards changed, or is it just people changing, or different people looking at cards having different opinions on different days? I think it's more the latter than the standards just being completely different. But I am concerned, though, for example, like if, that Kiner card was a 7, now it's a 5 because, they did change standards. That would make a lot of cards graded, 15 years ago. Are they now 2 grades lower than they should have been? So your 8s are now 6s, your 10s are now, your 10s are 8s. I mean, that would dramatically affect a lot of cards in terms of value. So I don't think that's really the case. I think it's probably just a grader grading a card on a certain day gave it a 5, on another day gave it a 7. That kind of inconsistency is where people have a lot of heartburn, and I just think it's part of this whole grading thing. Next up are 2 cards that one of them PSA and SGC agreed 100%. It says 99 Topps Chrome Early Road to the Hall, meaning they both say it's too small, and they didn't say it's trimmed. So I got an authentic holder here, but they won't give it a number grade. They say it's too small. These cards are numbered out of 100. There you go. So now I have 2 companies both say the card is men's size. Okay. I guess I have to say, well, the card is men's size. The part I get with this card, though, is this. If you look at the holder, it doesn't really, maybe like slightly smaller than that holder. Maybe they're looking at the left to right more than top to bottom. But it fits the holder pretty well. So again, I'm not going to sit here and bash it. I'll put this in my collection. Still numbered out of 100. Still a cool card. It's just a card that, I wish could have got a number grade, because a 8 or 9 on this card would make the value higher. And also, if I want to trade or sell it for other patent cards, it would have been cool to have a number grade. But hey, it's still one of 100 that's out there. So it's still pretty rare. And it's not like it's a fake card or altered card. It's just, it says it's men's size. It doesn't meet the minimum size to be able to grade. Last but not least is a card that's been the bane of my existence for years. I've graded this card multiple times with PSA, and now multiple times it's been graded with SGC. So what did it come back this time? And what card is it? It is a 60 Ernie Banks. So this card was originally an SGC 8, I believe. And I popped it, sent it to PSA twice, and they said it's altered. And they didn't really tell me how it was altered the 2 times I submitted it. But now SGC is saying it's authentic but erased, and they're saying some dealers looked at it and right there's some power erasing of a print line. But again, SGC graded this an 8 at one point. So is it difference of opinion? They have better tools to look at erasing. Are they more hyper aware of erasing than they were when this card was first graded? I don't know. But from a value perspective, this card went from being a couple $100 to less than 100, $50, $60. I don't know what people would pay for a card like this, but it's disappointing. It's just disappointing to have a card this beautiful. Again, I love how this card looks, but they're saying something like this is why it's no longer, a number grade. It's just authentic. And that's disappointing, honestly, to have it go from a PSA 8 or SGC 8 to altered by PSA to authentic, altered, erased by SGC, all within, 4, it's been graded at least 4 times minimum now. And it's just disappointing. And again, I know dealers out there. I'm not going to, name names, because I feel like I don't know if they're doing it anymore. But back in the day, I know dealers would submit cards 40 times to finally get it in the holder they felt like it needed to be in. So will this be one of those cards where you just keep submitting it over and over and over, and hopefully one time it slips through the cracks to get back to that 8 grade? I don't know. I think that is something that some dealers do. I know, in fact, some dealers did it. I think today, with today's kind of more high visibility, I think with especially a PSA, if you submitted the same card multiple times, they would eventually catch on to it, and then they would automatically flag it in the system, that card is going to automatically grade a certain grade, no matter how many times you submit it. I think SGC eventually would catch on too. So I think you could probably submit this card 5-6 times before that happened, maybe max. But then after that, they would probably say every time you submit this card in the order, they're going to compare a photo, say that's the same card, so we're going to give it the same grade it was last time. I don't think you can do that whole thought experiment of sending a card 100 times and getting 100 grades to do a statistical analysis to see what the standard deviation is and what the grade distribution looks like on a single card graded multiple times. I don't think they would let you do that. I think they would flag the card in the system at some point because it would be suspicious that you're seeing the same card in so many times. But this card has at least been graded 4 times. Once by someone else and 3 times by me. So it's kind of dead. I mean, I'm not going to waste my time with it anymore. But I thought it was a good experiment to see if I could go from SGC to PSA back to SGC, and I did, but I lost the number grade. So there it is. So that's the last card I have to show. Again, it's disappointing that we're still just inconsistent in grading. Both sides, PSA and SGC. And it just shows that on any given day, maybe you'll get a bad grade or get a card listed as not meeting min size or whatever. And then it doesn't surprise me when someone can resend those cards in on a later day and get a completely different grade or a completely different outcome. And so it is kind of one of those things where we just don't, have it figured out to the point where it's consistent enough to be, predictable. And so now grading is unpredictable. So it's sort of like almost like you're kind of playing a game or Russian roulette. You don't know what you're going to get sometimes. So it's still disappointing we're there, that we still see these kind of issues popping up. But, let me know what you guys think in the video. Obviously, I did much better getting these cards graded through SGC than PSA. But it does show you, that level of inconsistency. So that is it, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'll see you next time on Cards and Comics. Bye.